And we're live. Welcome back to another episode of the Wheelie Podcast, everyone. This week we are actually sponsored by Pedigo Electric Bikes, some awesome electric bikes. We're going to talk more about that later in the show. But first, as usual, I'm your host, Micah Toll, and I am joined by Electrek's Seth Weintraub, who I believe is in Topeka, Kansas, doing something pretty cool. How you doing, Seth?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm in Topeka. We're at the Electrek Formula Sun Grand Prix, and I'm in the scorers table. You'll probably see some solar cars going behind me. But today's even more special because we have Luke Workman, battery expert from Zero and a bunch of other places with us today. And we finally get to talk to him about some of the happenings in the e-bike world. Luke, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Micah, why don't you start us off?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I think Seth and myself are super e-bike nerds, so we're excited to have both an e-bike and a battery nerd here to talk to us, especially because now we can actually get to some nitty-gritty details here and nerd out. So, we've got a number of questions about different areas of batteries in the industry. One thing that keeps coming up, especially lately, is the subject of battery fires. It's something related to a lot of for but especially in New York City, where there's a lot of low quality level. So we used to be a little bit about that, about this phenomenon, fires is leading to these low quality batteries to catch fire and about the improve heat for everybody.
Micah dropped off a little bit there, so why don't I take over? Luke, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine. Yeah, I was having trouble understanding Micah too.
Yeah. So, let's just start off with a background. I know you spent time at Zero.
Mm-hmm.
You were a guru at Endless Sphere. So, how did you get into batteries?
Well, I used to want to be a Formula One engine designer,
Oh,
and
interesting.
all the work effort I was putting in and schooling effort was to make higher performance internal combustion engines for Formula One. And I had a moment of realization that if I made a perfect internal combustion engine operating on a Carnot cycle, I wouldn't beat around 66% efficiency or so if I made it frictionless and eliminated all pumping losses and all sources of drag, because there's a thermodynamics limit there. And in this situation, it means if you wanted to make, say, 1,000 horsepower and your limitation on a perfect design meant that you'd have to make an extra 33% waste heat to deal with to make that power. And you have the same melting point limitations on your materials you're building your motor from. This means you can never achieve the power density with internal combustion that you can with an electric motor. And once I had that realization, I lost interest in Formula One engine design because it was something that if you did perfect it, you still wouldn't have anything.
Right. So, like kind of a first principles approach, like
Mhm.
you're just never going to get optimum with internal combustion.
Yep, you
So,
spend your whole life fighting for another percent or two, and it still wouldn't make any difference at the end of it.
okay. So then you realized electric drivetrains were the way to go, and
Mhm.
then where'd you go from there?
I started working in data center UPS battery backup systems for Microsoft, and
Interesting.
yeah, worked in a couple facilities there, doing UPS megawatt double conversion UPS backup. So yeah, essentially you pull power from the grid continuously at megawatts, then you convert this into floating a DC bus bank, which undergoes inverters running from that DC bus bank to power server loads in a data center. And essentially it means that the servers never see utility power. So if utility spikes or whatever, they're isolated from it. So this got me started in batteries at a very large scale, and I was an enthusiast at this point for building e-bikes and other DIY EVs. And 6 years of doing megawatt scale batteries for the data centers, and I left to do Zero Motorcycles batteries in late 2010.
So kind of at the genesis of the company. The company must have been quite small at that point.
Yep. Yeah, it was a very small, intimate team at that time. And design work also was so fast because it was very unencumbered at that point to do development. It was great.
And then from zero, I know now you've got a lot of little things going on, or a lot of big things going on. But was there anything between zero and now that
Yeah, helping Joby Aviation, helping
Oh yeah,
Airbus Vahana project, working for Borg Warner, working for a handful of OEMs that I'm not sure I should mention right now
yep,
because I don't know what NDA agreements have expired and not expired. But yeah, it's been an amazing ride. And at the moment, our research and development facility is focusing, well, over half of our work that we're doing right now is for space clients. So we have both launch providers and communication satellites and satellite tugs that we're doing battery qualification for and testing for. Turns out not all cells like to run in vacuum.
interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that brings us to today. I know you do some consulting on e-bike battery fires, and I think that's one of the areas we want to kind of talk about. So obviously in New York City, there's been quite a few stories about battery fires. There's even been some fatalities, some burned down buildings. What can you tell us about, like, why does this seem to be happening in New York? What are the problems that are arising? How can consumers kind of keep themselves
Navigate
safe?
these waters.
Yeah.
Well, essentially, New York is a bit of a perfect storm from the perspective of cold enough environment that the sidewalks want to ice up for a good portion of the year, and streets want to ice up for a good portion of the year, but high enough population density that they have the budget to salt it every day. And so this means the vehicles that operate in New York are continuously driving through a salt spray slurry coming up off the wheels. If your bicycle is doing, say, 25 miles per hour forward, the bottom of the tire relative to the ground is doing 0 miles per hour, and the top of the tire relative to the ground is doing 50 miles an hour while you're traveling at 25. So this top of the tire doing 50 while you're traveling is flinging droplets off, and then the vehicle travels through that swirl of droplets, a turbulent cloud of corrosive droplets, which ingress into features of the battery, connectors of the battery, seams of the battery.
Right. So, if you don't have a perfectly sealed, like airtight battery, saline spray is getting in there, and that's quite corrosive. And
That's the other side of it too, is saying perfectly sealed. We do mass spectrometer tests to quantify the rate of leakage on different things, and even at the cell level, the cells aren't perfectly sealed. They're leaking electrolyte at a given rate. If that rate is low enough to be acceptable, then it might make the lifetime of the pack using that cell without incident. The reason I bring it up is just because there are no perfect seals. There's kind of a funny assumption. Folks will seal something to the point that it can pass liquid water ingress testing. Let's say that you submerge it a meter underwater to do an IP test. This is actually a very easy test to pass. It's a test that most devices will pass with little more than Scotch tape over some seams, or maybe a wipe of silicone, or a bit of hot glue here and there, and they'll pass a test like IP67 because, again, water submersion is the easiest of all tests to pass for the reason that water, when it's stuck to itself, has surface tension and wants to stay adhered to itself. And when you have vapor intrusion, this is the killer. So on an e-bike pack where someone can say pass this IP test, that same battery, every time it's simply warmed by the sun, even if it's not used, every time it's simply warmed by the sun, just sitting parked somewhere, that gas inside expands and it normalizes pressure with that expanded gas. So gas leaves the battery when it warms up. And then every time it cools, if the sun sets and the air is loaded with saturated humidity at the time that it's cooling, then it's ingressing this humidity-laden condensate. And when it cools enough, it will condense out. And unfortunately, water doesn't want to condense where you would like it to. Like if the droplets would condense on the plastic walls of a housing or something, that would be fantastic because they're not shorting anything. But vapor condensates on surfaces with the highest heat capacity and highest thermal conductivity. So this means the locations in the pack which have metal parts, fine metal parts, and especially crevice volumes, because you have the greatest chance of collision with a vapor molecule to stick when you have crevice volumes. So this means as that pack wants to cool and it's transitioning through dew point inside between all the different metal points in that pack, it will have condensation condense. And if there's a voltage potential across that condensate, then it can begin to cause electrolysis and lead to a fire.
So what can e-bike owners do to protect themselves and their batteries, or are we simply reliant on manufacturers making better batteries?
Well, it's interesting to say, what can a consumer do to rely on it? Because I would love to be able to say, well, get a pack that's past this standard, this given standard, right? And then you'll have a safe battery. The sad thing is, I haven't seen a standard yet that was useful or meaningful with relationship to whether the pack will catch fire over its life. The reason for this being, most of the standard tests are completed in, say, a 1 hour period to a 24-hour period. And to track corrosion phenomena that leads to fire, it's often a multi-month series of electrolysis, salt path buildup, hydration of salt paths, and an eventual outcome in a molten salt bridge with a superionic path, which causes a fire. But it's not something that you can test in that, even if you had unlimited budget and unlimited test equipment, simply following the time interval for the certifications of the pack would make it a useless test,
Right. So what is one to do? What is the future of the industry here? How do we eliminate bike fires?
Okay. Something I've never had to go do forensics for was a potted battery. Haven't actually seen one catch fire in the wild in my whole life yet, doing batteries since 2006. So essentially, if you flow the battery assembly full of a monolithic resin encapsulation, monolithic polymeric encapsulation, you've displaced that cavity for humidity to ingress to and condense inside. So essentially, if you fill the lungs of a system that was expanding and contracting with temperature to cause a breathing effort, if you've fill that free volume, it stops breathing. And if you fill that free volume in a monolithic encapsulation, then you stopped that breathing ingress cycle, and you protected all the surfaces from electrolysis and corrosion beginning. So this is one of the reasons why I like, if I'm putting it in my own home, I only want potted batteries, for the reason that it's far too easy to initiate fire with again, like you mentioned, a little dribble of saline. A little dribble of saline in any non-potted e-bike battery, and whether you get a fire that day or not isn't the question, but it's coming. You put the salt traces in the right areas, that it's merely an atmospheric hydration and temperature cycling away from progressing.
Interesting. And then, I mean, we don't kind of advocate for people to, open their batteries and dip them in, plastic or anything like that. But are there any manufacturers that you can think of that are doing the potting well?
Yeah. For example, Lunicycles is one that after wire bonding and quality testing the pack electrically, it gets monolithically encapsulated in a resin. They also use a resin, one of my favorite types, that it's loaded with 60% by weight endothermic fillers. And so the resin itself is a polyurethane base that's there to provide the plastic material, you could say, once it's set, to keep these fillers in place. But the fillers themselves have an endothermic quench ability that's very high. So, you might think of phase change systems like a wax holder for cells, right? This holds a tiny amount of thermal energy in that phase change from melting the wax to solid wax. In this case, we have over 100 times that phase change energy of melting a wax when we go from a solid to a gas with this endothermic decomposition of the filler. And because of that huge endothermic energy quench, it allows you to have very tight cell spacing and be able to trigger thermal runaway on any of the cells or any even groups of the cells. And not only does it not transmit cell to cell in propagating thermal runaway, but it quenches and extinguishes itself with no firefighting efforts required. And so not only does the potting prevent fires, but in the event that you do have fires, even doing multi-cell initiations, you can have a null outcome from that event where it was an initial firework release and no further fireworks with no fire extinguishing efforts needed. This also stops the risk to human life and structure fires.
Wow.
For two mechanics, one that the pack doesn't want to run away anymore, and the other that it's very difficult to get it to initiate.
Wow. So are there other battery or lithium chemistries that perhaps would be safer if the e-bike industry moved towards, like lithium iron phosphate, lithium graphene, that sort of thing, that could improve fire risk?
From the perspective of a molten salt bridge fire, being iron phosphate or high nickel, the only difference it makes is in the, one has a non-thermitic type decomposition. So in a high nickel cell, so we're saying a non-LFP cell right now, you've got an aluminum foil cathode current collector, which is coated in mixed metal oxides, usually nickel, manganese, cobalt, in a given ratio, often 8-1-1 today. But this has the ability to liberate that oxygen. Again, you might be thinking of a ceramic and you think, well, it's got such a good bond with oxygen, it's so stable, And unfortunately for a battery, if you had a stable ceramic bond, it wouldn't be able to share its oxygen's valence electrons to be useful in the battery. So we have to have an unstable metal oxide. So they pair as much oxygen onto the cathode material as they can, as much free oxygen onto this cathode material, and done in a vacuum furnace at high temperatures where you bleed in oxygen. But the reason they do this is because that loosely bound oxygen is what works in the cathode to interstitially hold lithium for us. And so the unfortunate side of that is, if you ever made thermite as a kid, it's iron oxide and aluminum powder, as the classic thermite recipe. And this is the same recipe, except instead of iron oxide, you're using nickel oxide and cobalt oxide. And unfortunately, they make a better thermite than iron does. And so rather than having two dusts together, you've got one foil, for your current collector together, and it's maybe 9 to 14 microns of thickness. So it has a appropriate surface area ratio to make this single replacement ionic thermitic decomposition. In a phosphate, essentially what that means is that those cells want to burn hot enough to leave behind a slag of 1600 degrees Celsius molten nickel as a reduced ingot on their decomposition product. So it's a very high temperature failure. And with an iron phosphate cell, if the cell itself is going into runaway, then those temperatures are much lower. Rather than a 1600 degree slag, we often see, say, 450, 500 degrees C as total peak temperatures in iron phosphate cells under runaway. So this is a very nice reduction in heat. However, from the perspective of will the fire start still, and is that fire adequate to catch a structure on fire? Whether they're iron phosphate or high nickel, it makes little to no difference on their initiation. From the perspective that molten salt bridges and ionic salt bridges start that fire from liquid ingress through a means that doesn't involve the cell doing anything more than providing electrical power. And so an iron phosphate cell provides electrical power, despite its chemistry internally being safer. It provides that electrical power into a electrolysis and molten salt bridge short just as well as any other cell type to start fires.
Right. Okay. So not the panacea we hoped for.
Half the forensics we've done have been iron phosphate.
Wow.
And I don't think that half the world's packs are iron phosphate.
Oh,
but
interesting.
People often seem to take safety less seriously in their design if they go, oh, well, we have iron phosphate cells, and so we don't have to validate anything or run any safety testing. And so that's one of the reasons we see so many fires from them.
And solid state stuff coming up, is there anything there?
Well, for NDA reasons, I'm going to have to not speak about any particular products or cells, but I guess I'll just say, if I had to pick between going to a solid electrolyte or going to a compressed gas electrolyte, between one of these phases having higher thermal kinetic and ionic mobility, and one of these phases having highly trapped and restricted thermal kinetics and ionic mobility, essentially, I'm a fan of going the opposite direction from a liquid to a gas electrolyte, I would have to say, over going from a liquid to a solid electrolyte. For that reason being that when a solid actually has, keep in mind, a good solid electrolyte would let you set a chunk of lithium metal on top of it and have it just slowly drop through the material, just drop through the table, right? And the crazy thing is there are a few compounds that do this, such as LPS, lithium phosphorus sulfide. It's a somewhat common solid electrolyte people do research with. So essentially, when you get a solid to this level of reactivity where it would work as an electrolyte for you, the safety of this solid, it becomes so crazy. Like in the case of LPS, it's lethal to humans at something like sub-milligram per kilogram levels. So if you breathe it, if you ingest it, you're poisoned and die. If it contacts air, it's pyrophoric, so it burns on contact with air, and it's also hydrophoric, so it burns on contact with water too. So the idea that this will make a safer battery for the world by being solid electrolyte, despite having it be a situation where if anything happened to mechanically damage the cell, the user will probably die, and it may kill the others around them too. And I'm just talking at like a small consumer product level, not at a vehicle level. So yeah,
right.
in that case, you could say I'm less optimistic on solids, but again, I guess I can't talk about the test that we're running, but it's
anything good out there? Can you give us some good news? Like what's the exciting coming up, super safe, like organic rubber compound that somehow is
okay?
Or do we all have to go back to pedaling?
The salt batteries. I don't know, something. Sodium.
So from a feel good answer on batteries here.
Yes, please.
So we're testing different sulfur cells right now, and there's sodium cells. Thank you, Erica. There's a handful of different chemistries that you don't run out of the ingredients. One of them being a sodium iron phosphate battery, for example. You can actually, they work and they work fine. By fine, I mean they're not as good of energy density as lithium, but enough that you can build useful things with them. So from an energy perspective and an earth crustal abundance perspective, we have no limit on the amount of sodium iron phosphate batteries we can have. So, there's folks that say, well, we can never have a clean power grid because we don't have enough lithium, to to buffer the energy of the grid. And using, chemistries like sodium iron phosphate, for example, you have enough materials, for everybody to have their own multi-hundred kilowatt home storage battery and for the grid to be buffered both, and so this is a great opportunity from the perspective of nothing has to be a rare or limited abundance material in a battery. We use those because we get outstanding performance from using rare and less abundant materials, unfortunately. But we have a future that won't need that. From a high performance perspective, of course, mini cells today running high silicon content anodes are reaching, between say 400 watt hours per kilogram to 700 watt hours per kilogram. And even they're still not at a physics limitation. They're at the limitation of what's practical to build and manufacture into a cell, and what's practical to manufacture for materials. From a physics perspective, if you even build a capacitor with one layer thick, so graphene sheets separated by one layer of barium titanate, you can actually build a capacitor that's not a physics problem to beat gasoline by 3 to 1.
Wow.
Energy density wise, and it's a capacitor. It doesn't even use ionic flow. You just charge a dielectric, so you have theoretically decay and degradation approaching zero, and temperature stability that's very high too. So that's something that's not a physics problem. It's something that's a manufacturing problem to make something that's one layer of graphene perfect, with barium titanate and one layer between it, right? So that's something very bright about energy tech, is it's not most of the things you're dealing with aren't a physics problem in particular. They're a materials and manufacturing and what can be done for a low dollar per watt hour problem over there being a limitation on what we can do with our particular atoms and molecules we've got here on Earth.
All right. So the future might hold some answers, though, for us, you're saying.
Yep.
And certainly, like, from a first principles perspective, there's ways to get to where we need to be, and that's the good news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a physics problem. You're not up against, trying to defeat gravity or something. You just have to have very, very formidable manufacturing challenges, material processing challenges, and there's also the electrolyte silver bullet additive too, in that many chemistries simply were impractical and infeasible. Maybe they don't plate smoothly, maybe they dendrite. There's lots of weird problems that stop other cheap chemistries from working, and yet sometimes the strangest additive you wouldn't expect, even in a concentration like 0.1%, can it completely eliminate those unwanted effects that are occurring in different cheap chemistries. And this can be a complete game changer for even old chemistries that have been tried since the 60s or whatever, may or may not have the ability to work well in the future.
Awesome. Well, I think that gives us a really good lay of the land. Luke, I really appreciate you coming on the show. If people want to get a hold of you, you're Luke Workman LFP on Twitter. I know you have a bunch of other, like, what is your Endless Sphere name again?
Live for Physics.
Live for Physics. Yeah, there's lots of great ways to get a hold of you. Thank you so much for being on the show. Maybe we'll get you on again here soon. Luke Workman, everybody.
Take care. All
right. So on to the regular piece of our show. We are looking. So read us in, Micah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a number of interesting stories this week. Eurobike was last week, so we've got some updates from Eurobike, including testing out FUELL's newest electric bikes. We just heard about the first e-bike with ChatGPT integrated into it. And if you're wondering how that could possibly be integrated into an e-bike, stick around, you will find out. And then on some slightly larger vehicles, CSC in California has a speedy new electric scooter, Vespa style, not standing style. We've got a new electric motorcycle that's going to integrate Tesla's NACS charging plug. And lastly, we're going to finish with one of the awesomely weird Alibaba electric vehicles of the week, which might get a bit wet. So we're going to start off here, I think, with FUELL, right?
Yeah, first ride, FUELL Flluid-2 and Flluid-3 electric bikes change the game.
All right, and that's, if you're not watching this, that's FUEL with two L's on the end because it's sort of a play on Eric Buell's last name, Buell, the legendary motorcycle builder. So Eric Buell started FUEL e-bikes, and these are the second and third models from the company. And they went a new direction this time, using a mid-drive motor from a automotive company called Vallejo. They make parts for all sorts of other automotive OEMs, but they also make e-bike motors. But this specific motor is very interesting because it has a built-in gearbox. So as you can see in this video here, we're using a Gates carbon belt drive, but we still have several gears with a multi-speed transmission, even though we've got a belt drive, which is normally tricky to do without a rear hub. So it's a really cool integration, and it puts everything right in the center of the bike. You've got your motor there, quite powerful, 130 Newton meters, and you've got your automatic shifting gearbox. If you don't like automatic shifting, which some people don't, you can still manually shift the gears. It's electric shifting, so there's a button to shift up and down. But when I was testing it out, I really enjoyed the predictive shifting because basically all you do is pedal. It's like, if you've driven a manual and an automatic car, it's the same thing. Once you get into the automatic car, it's like you don't need most of your brain anymore. You just push the gas and the car figures it out. Same thing here. You just either start pedaling or give it throttle for the North American version, and the bike knows when to shift. It knows what cadence the motor should be at, that sort of thing. So a really, really nice high-tech motor and gearbox solution there that actually works really well. It took them a little while to sort of like fine-tune it. Both Vallejo and FUEL were working together a lot on that, but the end product is really quite nice. One downside to me, it's a bit loud. So you really hear that gearbox kind of winding up. For some people, they'll probably like that because it's a little more connection to the bike. It kind of feels like almost a bit of a motorcycle in that way, sort of hearing the motor wind up. Not nearly as loud as a motorcycle, but for someone who comes from very silent e-bikes, it caught me off guard. All told, though, a very nice bike. Gates carbon drive, really nice Tektro hydraulic disc brakes, two 1 kilowatt-hour batteries on the larger model, the step over, so 2 kilowatt-hours of capacity. This model we're looking at is the step through, so it's only got one kilowatt-hour battery, but still plenty for most people, I think. So all told, really nice bikes. A bit pricey. They start about 5,500 bucks, but they're very, very high-end bikes designed for people that ride every day, always going to work, always commuting kind of thing. So I'm really impressed with what they've built here. What do you think of these models, Seth?
They look great. What did you think of the quality of I noticed the weld there. What do these bikes feel like top notch quality wise?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the welds could have been a little bit nicer. These might sort of be the pre-production prototype frames, but in terms of the build quality, the componentry, I mean, they ride the way I would expect someone who's used to building motorcycles to build a bike. In that nothing's creaky, nothing's feels weak. It all rides like a solid vehicle to me.
And weight wise, they look like a little bit heavy, but are they crazy heavy? What's the weight on these?
So I don't remember the weight off the top of my head, but it is quite heavy. Yeah, that's a downside. They also have a lot of extra components, even things like the built-in mirrors, the larger LED lights, that kind of stuff. Like it adds a lot. So that's the downside. The more you put, the heavier it gets. Not to mention one or two 1,000 watt hour batteries.
Yeah, I know having an integrated motor into the pedaling makes the sensors, the torque sensors, really like you always get the best experience that way. Is that what you found as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the pedaling was beautiful. It has a throttle. I was using the North American version they had there, but I almost didn't use the throttle at all, often just to get started, um, especially from a stop, but it just pedals so nicely. Even then, the nice thing about the predictive shifting is it automatically downshifts when you come to a stop. which I'm terrible about. I often forget to downshift and I'm stuck in high gear when I need to get rolling.
Yep. Yeah, my coffee shop is at the bottom of a hill, and I always just fly in there, don't think about
Yep.
gears, and then when I start up again, I'm always in trouble. So that's nice to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, moving on. Here are the coolest e-bikes and other things we saw at Eurobike. Obviously, we just saw the fuel, but what else we got?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch here. I highly recommend that anyone listening go check out the article because there's probably 20 different things here, but we can pull out a few here. It's always great to see Revolt and
Yep.
Excite. They're sort of sister companies, and they're just, I mean, the design is incredible. Revolt is more of the sort of almost steampunky with a lot of like brass and copper accents, though they combine that with Catalonian leatherwork. They're a Barcelona-based company, so just really beautiful bikes. And then they started Excite, or Excite, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that's their sort of more modern, high-techy bikes, though they've got a lot of that tech in the Revolt as well. So just a really cool Barcelona-based company that builds really, really nice, highly engineered e-bikes. Always fun to see them at a show, and usually they've got something new hanging around. So it's always great to catch up with them. But then there was, a lot of different some cargo bike options. The Elio's got a mid-drive and a front hub motor, so we've got an all-wheel drive bike there with two motors.
Wow.
A lot of sort of interesting things that, but especially in the cargo realm, we saw lots of really neat cargo bikes, higher powered bikes, bikes with really big cargo capacities. Benno here had a bike hooked up to an Airstream trailer, so I guess if you wanted to go on a somewhat minimalist vacation, you could do that.
Like to the backyard.
Yeah, you're gonna like this one, by the way, Seth. So Greenway, they're a battery manufacturer that supply a lot of big companies. So you might have a Greenway battery and not even realize it. They've got this dock that you can put your battery in, and suddenly it's a power station. So you can plug in your devices, both like 110-volt AC and smaller, your laptop, your phone, that kind of thing. And so there are actually a few companies that were doing that. The next one there, Molly, also has a sort of a dock situation with their range extender battery. It only has one single USB-C port, so you're kind of limited on what you can charge with it. But at least they're going in that direction of giving you a second use for your e-bike battery. So it's cool to see companies expanding into that sort of power bank add-on to their existing e-bike batteries.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what Juiced kind of showed us about a year ago, but we haven't heard much about it since then.
Yeah, we got to follow up with them on that.
Ducati was there with their crazy bikes.
Yeah, crazy expensive.
Crazy expensive. Turn, of course. We love their cargo bikes.
Yeah, also expensive, but I'd probably rather buy a Turn than a Ducati bike. And that's their new HSD, so it's even higher weight rating, a little bit more expensive now. It used to be sort of like their lower to mid-tier bike, but now it's moving a little closer to the GSD. But it's got 400-pound weight capacity, so you could bring multiple kids on the back there. Plus, they've got a lot of accessories.
That's cool. Engwe was there on the other side of the price spectrum.
Yeah, so they're a little cheaper. They've got this really interesting bike. It's got like triple suspension. So there's a normal rear swing arm, but then there's also suspension down in front of the seat post there. It's very strange.
Yeah.
But
it looks like they have multiple batteries too. Like, is it seat post battery?
That's a good question. It does look pretty chunky. I was so distracted by the suspension that I missed that might be a second battery.
Wow. Okay. A lot going on there.
Yeah. So Comagio was there. They make the electronics that power a lot of the connectivity in bikes like Muller, Super 73 Cake. This was a new one for me here, Maibu. They do bamboo e-bikes.
Nice.
It's just like beautiful. I mean, each one is kind of unique in that way because it's a natural material. So I don't know too much about them, but it's pretty.
If Gilligan's Island was still happening, this is what they'd be riding around the island on.
There you go. Yeah. This might have been one of my favorite cargo bikes. Look at this mechanism. It's like a narrow, normal bike when you don't need it to be a cargo bike.
Is that magnetic?
No, there's like a locking clasp there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it's really, really slick design.
Oh, Acer was there.
Yeah, so they're showing off their EB, I think that's how you pronounce it, EBII bike. That's got the single supported wheels, and it's a really nice looking bike. It's not quite production yet. Hopefully by the end of the year they can get it out. But it's a slick looking design, and it's always fun to see these from companies that don't normally build e-bikes because they often come in with different ideas of what a bike could be.
Yeah, and Acer is known in the PC world for making very low cost, high quality products. So hopefully they can do the same in the bike world.
Yeah, and this was my favorite non-bike uh, product of the show, I would say, is the solar scooter. And it's got a solar panel on both the deck and the steering tube there. It'd be perfect for where you are at
I
the.
was just gonna
Yeah,
say, like, that would be very popular in these parts.
yeah,
I'm surprised actually there's not a few,
that should be
running
like a
around here.
pit bike for like going around the pit there. That would be
The
perfect.
official pit bike of the Electrek Solar
There you
Grand
go.
Prix. All right. Kilo.
Yeah, so this is not a bike at all. The company makes bikes and scooters, but they had this little quadricycle Jeep thing there also that really caught my eye. And their motto is less is more. I don't know how to pronounce it in French. It's on the back of the little Jeep bed there, but really cool sort of like minimalist quadricycle Jeep that they're going to be producing by the end of the year. So that was neat.
That's interesting. The steering wheel looks like it's in the middle, so like the passengers can just help you out, like my wife always wants to do. All right, 10 ways cargo one.
Yeah, so 10 Ways is really known for like low cost entry commuter bikes, but they just unveiled this really nice looking front loader bike that, I mean, it looks like an Urban Arrow or
Hmm.
like a Gazelle, which are, very nice high end bikes. So this is coming from what's normally like $1,000 cheap, entry level bike company. So it's neat to see this one. I think it's going to be expensive, like 4,000 bucks. So don't expect entry level prices, but certainly a lot cheaper than an Urban Arrow, which is like what, 7, 8,000, something like that.
Yeah. I know when we were talking to Upway, they said cargo bikes are expensive, but shipping them is like doubles the expense. So like it's always hard to, to get those prices down.
Yeah.
Uh, 60.
Yeah, so last and perhaps least here is 60, which is looks like some sort of almost like an Archimoto, but this is technically, I think they consider it a bike because it has pedals. It looks like a zero motorcycle motor in the back there, but up front there's pedals connected to a generator. So theoretically, the race car driver sitting in this is pedaling, and that's translating into like a throttle signal that controls this 75-mile-an-hour three-wheeled car. Yeah,
Pedaling at 75 miles per hour. That's always going to be fun.
yeah, with what looks like an 80 kilowatt motor in back. So there you
Well,
go. A lot of interesting things at Eurobike this year.
yeah, I'm getting a little bit of a FOMO thing going on. I kind of wish I could have made it this year.
Yeah, there was I will say if you couldn't make one, this was the one to not make because while we saw interesting things, unfortunately there wasn't the same level of innovation we've seen in previous years. The level of new motors, new products, new, anything. Here it was really more just like out of the box designs, bamboo bikes, weird 75 mile an hour go-karts with pedals. So hopefully next year we see companies come back in with more updated products and some more innovation.
Totally. All right, let me talk about our sponsor real quick. This week's episode is sponsored by Pedigo Electric Bikes, America's #1 electric bike retailer. Pedigo believes in making e-bikes easy to use and incredibly fun to ride. That's why they offer extensive selection of over 20 bike models, each with endless customization options. No matter your style or preferences, Pedigo has the perfect bike for you. That includes the Avenue, the company's newest model designed with classic European look paired with modern features. It has a 500-watt motor, 48-volt battery, and a range up to 56 miles on a single charge, making it perfect for commuting or leisurely rides around town. The Avenue comes in both 28-inch classic and step-through frame and a smaller 26-inch step-through frame, making it accessible for any rider. With over 220 stores across the country, that's quite a bit, staffed with knowledgeable and local experts and dedicated service technicians, Pedigo ensures that you receive personalized attention and support every step of the way. Pedigo also offers a 5-year warranty on all e-bikes, which is among the longest in the market. I'm actually not sure if anybody has a 5-year warranty that I can think of. In July, Pedego is running an exclusive promotion for Electrek listeners. That's you guys. You can save up to $500 on the bikes, including their newest bike, the Avenue. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Head over to Pedego.com or hit up the link in the show notes for more info. Thank you again to Pedego for sponsoring this week's show.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. I think the one thing Pedego might not have is ChatGPT.
All right, ChatGPT, the first electric bike with ChatGPT unveiled. And it's weird as it sounds, why would you put ChatGPT in a bike?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. Autopia has decided to integrate ChatGPT, kind of like I think it was Mercedes that integrated ChatGPT into their cars, and you could like ask the car stuff like, "What can I do on my trip?" kind of thing. So it's the same idea here with Autopia. That I think the idea is you could ask it like for directions, or you could ask it like, you know, how many calories do you burn on a bike? I mean, I think it was more of a chance to like be the first to do something than to offer like a real innovative, helpful solution here. So I'm not sure that this is going to be something that really adds a lot of value for a lot of riders. And even Chat GPT itself isn't sure how it feels about this. Because at the end of the post, instead of giving my take, I asked Chat GPT what it thought about e-bikes having its own service, and it sort of gave a wishy-washy answer. So I'm not sure even ChatGPT is too excited about itself being inside of an e-bike. But I guess it does point to the fact that Utopia is really trying to stay at the cutting edge here. They're one of the first companies to put like fingerprint unlocking and stuff on their bikes. So props to them, I guess, for doing something out of the box. But I'm not sure I'm going to be asking my e-bike to find me a recipe for cheesecake anytime soon.
Right. And of course, you have your phone if you ever want to do something like this. So
Exactly.
not the not the like change gears ChatGPT or what gear is best for that. Not that kind of stuff. All right, moving on. CSC ES5 launched as a speedy seated electric scooter, taking a shot at the major competition.
So CSC, they've been around for a few decades, and they're a motorcycle dealer out in California. And like 5 years ago, they got into electric motorcycles and scooters. Their newest model here is really quite compelling. This is the ES5. Gets up to about 52 miles an hour, and it has 3 removable battery packs totaling something like 5.5 kilowatt hours, I think. So quite large. I mean, that's going to be enough for something like probably 60 to 80 miles of range, depending on exactly how fast you're going. Obviously, the faster you go, that's going to really cut into your range. But that's more battery than you'll find on any other scooter at this price. And it actually looks pretty good too. Like compared to the new scooters or something like that, it's coming in significantly more affordable. I think it's 50 $5,200, $5,300, something like that. So a comparably priced new scooter would be above 6,000, and this one gets you more range. It's got more power. It's got a mid motor with a belt drive instead of a hub motor. So there's a lot of nice things here. It also has one cool feature that I wish I saw more, which is a dash cam integrated into it. So you can have it constantly filming on loop. So like, if heaven forbid you ever gotten in an accident or something, like you could prove what happened, or, someone cut you off and that sort of thing. Or you can just like, catch a meteor on your ride kind of thing if you see something cool. Hopefully it's, for cool uses and not like, Your Honor, I submit to the court kind of thing.
Yeah. So the three removable batteries, are they like batteries we've seen on other bikes where you can pick them out and charge one while the other two are being used, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure yet. I'm guessing they're going to be kind of like, if you remember when we were at Eurobike a few years ago and we tried those, I think it was Kumpan scooters that had like the briefcase style 3 batteries. I'm guessing it's going to be kind of like those, and I think you could run those on 2 batteries. I know with my new scooter, if I take 1 battery out, it can still run, but at a lower power level. So it might be like that here because it just doesn't have as much, power capacity when it has fewer batteries. But nice thing is that because it's divided that way, you can actually get more capacity in, because I think somewhere around like 1.5 to 2 kilowatt hours it starts to get pretty darn heavy to actually carry a battery.
Right.
So, by dividing into 3 batteries, it might be tricky because you don't have 3 hands, but at least they are physically removable, as opposed to
Right.
companies like Silence, a Barcelona scooter company that they have a 5 kilowatt hour battery, but it's one battery and it actually has wheels because it's too big to carry around.
Yeah, I guess got to wheel it into the elevator or something. This looks like a super compelling scooter. I really don't understand why Vespa and Piaggio and all the others haven't jumped into this market. But if they're not going to do it, I'm wishing the best of luck to CSC. I think for $5,000, pretty compelling setup here. You're almost going highway speeds. You've got the modular battery system. Looks really good. Any downsides here?
So because CSC only has their California dealership, they're just outside of LA in Azusa. There's not like a nationwide, service network. They do have a massive warehouse full of spare parts. I've seen it, and so anyone who needs a part, they get it out to you in like 2 days by FedEx. But it does require you to do your own work or take it to a motorcycle shop to have something done on
Right.
it. So they don't have the same way. Like for example, Vespa. There's going to be a pretty large network of shops sort of thing where you can get servicing.
Right.
But like, when you bring up Vespa, I think they have the Electrek.co, but it's like $8,000, something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So, the price here is just so much better for the performance. 52 miles an hour for a city scooter. Who needs more than that?
Right. And it's 2,000 or $1,200 less than the NIU MQI Sport Extended Range.
Yeah. With
And
better performance.
with better performance. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. We're going to see a review of this anytime soon?
Hopefully, yeah. They're not going to be coming in until I think October or November, if I'm not mistaken. But hopefully by then I'll be able to get on one.
Cool. All right, moving on. First electric motorcycle maker signs on to Tesla's NACS charging network.
Oh, is that how it's pronounced? NACS?
I mean, Fred and I have been doing NACS, so
Okay, well, I'll follow you guys then. So,
yeah.
yeah, this is it's called Verge Motorcycles. This is a really interesting motorcycle because it's got a hubless rear wheel, so the motor's actually in the rim of that rear wheel. But the big story here isn't the motorcycle this time; it's that they've signed on to the NACS charging network, which uses Tesla's plug. And Seth, you know a lot more about this than I do, so can you tell us a little bit about how that plug became not just the Tesla plug anymore?
Yeah, so just quick background on it. Tesla had its own plug network, and then there's the CCS combo network, which is a much bigger, clunkier thing that kind of designed by committee. Europe's got one similar. It's called the CCS2. Um, they're like what I said, they're designed by committee. They're huge and chonky. And Tesla was like, honestly, it seemed like they were going to go along with the CCS2 at one point. But then something changed, and Tesla said, "Hey, look, we're going to open up our physical plug to be, for other manufacturers to use it." And then we heard nothing about it. We were wondering if it was like a Tesla, ploy to try to get into the federal tax or federal money for charging, and they were kind of trying to use a loophole that, hey, we're standard. But it turns out they were really pushing hard, and they got Ford about a month ago to sign up, and then a few weeks later GM, and then once GM and Ford were on board, it just like dominoes started following. And recently the Society of American Engineers, is that what SAE stands
I
for?
think it's automotive engineers.
Automotive engineers recently said that they would take over the standard and kind of run the standard from there, which means that a whole lot more automakers and chargers signed up. So now pretty much everybody in the industry is behind Tesla's connector as the new means of charging. And I imagine the other manufacturers that use DC fast charging will move. I mean, for motorcycles, it makes even more sense to have a smaller receptacle. Smaller parts on a motorcycle are a bigger difference. So Verge Motorcycles is the first to kind of announce it, but I would anticipate that Harley and really anybody else who uses both the J1772 charger and also the CCS combo will move to Tesla's connector because, you know, in 3 or 4 years, every charging outlet's going to be a Tesla connector. So
Yeah, and I was actually really surprised by this. I mean, so Verge Motorcycles is a very small Finnish company, so it's not like they're really gonna, push the motorcycle industry forward. But the reason I was surprised is because the motorcycle industry has historically lagged far behind the automotive industry when it comes to adopting new technology. A big example often is anti-lock brakes, which was like, a decade and a half or something longer it took to make its way into motorcycles than cars. Even just looking at electric motorcycles, the market share compared to electric cars have, basically become mainstream already, whereas electric motorcycles are still a very small segment of the market. So I was sure that, motorcycles were going to take much longer to adopt the NACS connector here. But if Verge Motorcycles is any indication, Seth, you might be right that we're going to start seeing companies like Livewire, maybe Zero Motorcycles signing on. Though with Zero, it's probably going to be trickier because I think that their battery architecture, or at least the voltage, is too low to accept faster charging. Though perhaps they could charge at lower rates using the same connector.
yeah, and you know, it's not just the fast charging; it's also the J1772. So, um, and it's easy to make adapters for going both ways, so that you would probably have a Tesla adapter, but you would have a J772 adapter, just like every Tesla has now. Um, at some point, everything will be Tesla though, or NACS, or NACS, depending on how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
So we have one more story. Let me move that here.
Yeah, this is the Alibaba one. I think I'm excited for this one.
All right. Low cost one-seater mini electric boat puts big thrills in a tidy package. Please tell me this is art and not this is Bauer's work, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah. Props goes
Okay.
out to our graphics guy, Michael Bauer, who worked his magic again this week and put me in this 5 foot 11-inch mini electric jet boat. This thing looks incredible. It's got a 15 kilowatt motor. Basically, it's like a jet ski put into a little boat hole, and it goes something like 30 miles an hour, which, considering most people are taller than this boat is long, I don't know about the stability at 30 miles an hour. There's actually a video at the end so you can see what it looks like when these things are rocketing across the water. Yeah, I mean, this definitely looks like it could go wrong quickly, but I will say that until it goes wrong, it looks like a lot of fun. It's an expensive fun though. These things cost $10,000 before you go through all the importations. So you might be looking at like a $20,000 boat there. But if you want your electric kicks on the water and something that you could practically fit in the back of an SUV, this is probably the one to go with.
Yeah, and that's kind of nice when you think about like a lot of the problems with getting these Chinese vehicles over to the U.S. is shipping, but this one is you could fit quite a lot of those in a container. It looks like.
Yeah, or like taking it to the beach, you don't even need like a trailer. You just
No,
like have it hang out the back of your trunk.
yeah, or you get a Silverado and put it in the back of that thing.
There you go. Or maybe in that Blazer would probably fit instead of a hatchback.
Yeah, that's a hatchback. I don't know if it would fit top to bottom. Maybe it would. It's not that. It is quite small.
Yeah, the thing's tiny. I think you could do it. That might need to be another video we do at some point.
Okay. Yeah. Will the boat fit in the back? That'll be the so almost a 4 kilowatt hour battery. It lasts 30 to 50 minutes. That seems reasonable. Probably not at full speed.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it does say peak power. I mean, we're taking the vendor out of their word here, but
okay.
it does say peak power.
So probably closer to the 30-minute than the 50-minute at peak power. The battery itself weighs 50 pounds, and that is about half the weight of the total package. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
So
the boat itself is pretty light. It's 77 pounds, just the boat.
That's impressive. And it's 5 feet 11 inches long, which is the exact length of the Silverado rear end, the Silverado EV. So that's
Perfect.
perfect for that. They should have had one out there.
And you could charge it from the back of the Silverado, right?
Yep.
There you go, you're charging on the way.
I'm gonna send this to Chevy as soon as we get off this podcast.
Yeah, there's the next collab.
Yep. All right.
Yeah, so, I don't think I'll be getting this one anytime soon, but if I do, I will let everyone know about it.
Yeah, we're definitely going to do a group buy if you get one. I think I'll be in on that one. And you said the price is $10,000. That's a little high.
Yeah. I mean, this is a specialty item though, so this doesn't grow on trees. These electric mini jet boats.
And the red, yellow, blue lines on the side, does that add any speed there?
I don't think those go all the way front to bow, so
Okay.
or bow to stern. So I don't think you get the racing stripe advantage.
Okay.
That's
all right. Well,
that's
that's it for this week. And actually, we don't have too many comments, so we'll just end it right there.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll be back in 2 more weeks for the next episode of the Wheelie Podcast. See you then, everybody.